Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex, my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today we're here to talk about the Giants. For some reason, already planning to interview former Atlanta head coach and current coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, Dan Quinn. Now, this is an interesting kind of coming out of nowhere scenario where we thought the Giants were going to do the right thing, go and get their GM, and then let him make the decisions. It seems like they're going to give the GM carte blanche to make a variety of decisions from the head coaching spot to the back end of the front office, and kind of overhaul this cultural shift and really start a new era for the Giants, who have been kind of stuck in 1950, trying to operate at a slug's pace when the NFL is taking off and well beyond them analytically and culturally. So I think the Giants are ready to make the step forward. Dave Gettleman clearly was holding them back. Joe Judge said he was doing stuff behind the scenes, but I really don't think that was true based on the authority they're about to give a new GM. Anthony, but Dan Quinn, interesting. There's a couple of different narratives that can fit this. A couple different things we want to talk about. Anthony's actually a proponent of Dan Quinn. He likes the guy. He has some arguments to be made to consider, why the Giants are actually looking at him. He seems to be a little bit hesitant toward the word excited by him. But I'll say maybe temporary expectations, Anthony. What do you think about Dan Quinn up to this point?
So I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of Dan Quinn. Now, anybody who knows me knows this would definitely not be my first choice of a head coaching candidate for the New York Giants. But I've seen a lot of really negative reactions to the fact that the Giants are going to interview Dan Quinn, and that confuses me. And I really don't think that Dan Quinn would be the worst thing in the world as the head coach of the Giants. So, no, I'm not a huge proponent of him, not a fan of his per se, but I think that fans need to kind of take it easy. I don't think that he would be the worst thing in the world. Is he my number one choice? Absolutely not. But is he in my top 5 to 10 choices? Absolutely. I don't think that he's anything to be so afraid of as a Giants fan. Listen, there are plenty of reasons we're going to get into it. We're probably going to have a little bit of a debate here because I think Alex is definitely an opponent of Dan Quinn. But there are some things when you take a look at Dan Quinn's past, Dan Quinn's history, coaching, especially when he was with Atlanta, there's a few points that I think I'm going to make that fans don't realize, and they're going to realize and be like, oh, you know what? That's a good point. So I'm excited to get into it. Dan Quinn, of course, I want to say, first of all, the New York Giants are doing the right thing in at least requesting for Dan Quinn because according to all of these reporters, every single one of the Giants' final 3 GM candidates has Dan Quinn on their short list of head coaches. And if that's the case, then you have to at least put in a request to interview him, get a chance to interview him because we are trying to give the general manager, full control of the team. So give him the opportunity to interview as many head coaching candidates as he likes and give him every opportunity to hire whichever one he wants. Whether we like it or not, we want the GM to be happy. And I think that the Giants are making the right move by at least putting in a request for Dan Quinn.
Yeah, look, I mean, Dan Quinn is a hell of an experienced coach, right? The Giants have gone the route of inexperience. Pat Sherman had a bit of experience in Cleveland. Ben McAdoo was new head coach. Joe Judge, new head coach. They've kind of had, I wouldn't even say a healthy blend. Pat Sherman's experience was clearly not up to par for what he really needed to become a successful head coach in the NFL. It felt like a rush hire. It felt like a lot of the good options were off the board by the time the Giants actually landed Pat Sherman in the first place. So I like how there's so many options and nobody's being scooped up off the market that quickly. The Giants are doing this right. They're bringing in a lot of GMs. It seems like it's a pretty sought after job at this point in time. So I'm excited by that prospect. But Dan Quinn's interesting, right? Because Dan Quinn took over as the head coach of the Falcons way back when in 2015. During the 2015 to 19 seasons, he won more than 7 games or more in all of them, right? He was fired in 2020 when he lost 5 consecutive games and they got rid of him. But until then, he had won a minimum of 7 games, including 11 games in 2016, and then 10 games in 2017. He made it to a Super Bowl. They lost to the New England Patriots. If you remember, that Super Bowl was absolutely insane. It was the Julian Edelman catch in the fingertips, and they came back from like 20 points down. It was an insane game. And then they lost to the Eagles in the NFC divisional game in 2017. So they've had some tremendous success with Dan Quinn, right? He's an experienced head coach. You know what you're getting in Dan Quinn. The problem is you probably know you're getting about average to maybe slightly above average. You're not going to be blown away by him. He's not the cutting edge of modern analytics. I mean, he might be at this point in time. It seems to be that maybe he's adapted, right? He's a defensive coordinator for Dallas. And Dallas's defense has struggled the last 2 years, to say the least. Their secondary has been spotty. They got Micah Parsons. He's been tremendous for them. They've done a great job activating him and getting him involved as a pass rusher. There's been some good things, right? But Dallas's defense really isn't their strong suit. It's more of a weakness for them, as we've seen. Their offense has been the strength of that team. And if you think Dallas's defense is good, maybe this year they took a big step forward, but last year they were one of the worst defenses in football. So Anthony, like, what do you objecting, saying that Dallas may have a better defense than I'm letting on?
I think Dallas's defense is rock solid. Dallas has a great defense. They have a phenomenal pass rush. They've developed young talent. Okay, I know Trayvon Diggs is kind of a burnt piece of toast, but there is a lot of talent being developed there. He does make a lot of plays. It's weird because for a second here, I do want to praise the Cowboys. Okay, they did win the division easily, right? By far, we're the best team in this division this year. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that their offense was great, but their defense took a huge step forward under Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn did a phenomenal job, in my opinion, with this Dallas Cowboys defense. Going into the year, we were like, oh, the Dallas Cowboys don't even have that much talent on defense. Then this year, they were like, oh, the Dallas Cowboys have one of the best defenses in the NFL at times. Like, they shut down some teams. They created a lot of turnovers. They generated a massive pass rush boost, right? I thought that this defense was pretty good this year, and the development of Micah Parsons in just his rookie season was tremendous. It was phenomenal. And Dan Quinn, we'll discuss his head coaching career in the past, of course, but I think that he's just done a really good job with the Dallas defense. And one thing that I'll say when you're discussing analytics, you might not remember this, Alex, but I was kind of a proponent in a way of Mike McCarthy. He wasn't my number one head coaching candidate at the time when the Giants were going through their last cycle. But one of the things that Mike McCarthy pitched that I kind of liked was that after he was fired from the Packers, he had about a year off. In that year off, he basically just sat down and learned analytics. He rebuilt analytics in his mind. He collaborated with Pro Football Focus for an entire year, and he did this whole thing where he just restudied the NFL game. And if you watch the Cowboys now, they're a very analytics friendly team. They run their team through analytics. Kellen Moore has a lot to do with that, their offensive coordinator, who's also getting head coaching looks. But that team does run with analytics. So if you're talking about Dan Quinn being over 50, being a little bit old, yeah, he is, but that also gives him experience. And also, he's working on one of the most analytics heavy and forward thinking coaching staffs in the NFL. And it's surprising to say, but Mike McCarthy actually is running one of the most analytics heavy and forward thinking coaching staffs in the NFL right now. And Dan Quinn's a part of that. So he absolutely does use analytics. I totally believe that because that's one of the main things that the Cowboys rebranded themselves on in their coaching staff when Mike McCarthy was hired. He definitely uses analytics. And another thing that we can all agree on, he definitely knows how to develop young talent, or at least that's what we've seen so far during Dan Quinn's stint in Dallas.
So there's two things that I would argue. One of them being, I wonder if analytics played a big part in that QB sneak the other day, because that was the dumbest decision I've ever seen. I cannot imagine any guru computer dude in the back, as Dave Gettman would say, is back there saying, run the ball on 14 seconds left.
I would say it probably, I don't know. Usually when those dumb mistakes that happen, it's because there is some sort of it's either the gut thing or there is some analytical numbers that they were looking at and they ignored their gut for. That's how it always ends up unfolding. So I don't know. It's really hard to speculate on that though.
That's fair. The second thing I would say is that Dallas's offense is so good that they stay on the field more than most offenses in the league, which keeps the defense off the field, keeps them healthy. If you put Dallas's defense on the Giants team, they're probably one of the worst defenses in football. You know what I mean? A good offense is a really, really good thing to have for a defense. It keeps them rested, keeps the possession, better field position, all different factors. Trayvon Diggs with 10 interceptions this year, the anomaly of his season. He's not a good corner. He gets toasted regularly, but he gets a lot of interceptions. He's a physical, fast guy. But I'll say this, I think that don't discount the offense's impact on how, the defense's numbers shook out, because Dallas gets leads so quickly. Other teams are forced to abandon the run game, which is why Trayvon Diggs gets so many interceptions, because they're forced to throw the ball and keep throwing. Eventually, there's going to be a mistake. So I think that plays into the factor of that defense as well. Now, I'm not saying Dan Quinn's a bad coach, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying he's very experienced. He knows, what he's doing. He's gotten to the Super Bowl. He knows how to get to those big moments, those big games. The problem is the Giants may want to go with somebody younger who can really develop these guys at the cutting edge level. I don't know where Dan Quinn lies in that, kind of system. I'm not exactly sure. I will say this: Dan Quinn's the defense this year. This is his first year with that defense, right? So he was hired by Dallas to replace Mike Nolan, who was dismissed after last season. So if there's any reason that I'm going to sit here and tell you that Dallas's defense got a lot better, it's probably because of the offense and Dan Quinn's coaching, right? Dan Quinn definitely made an impact there. I'm not trying to say he didn't make an impact because they replaced coordinators and they went from one of the worst to a top 10 team ranked in points allowed per game. They allowed 21.1 points per game last season, which is this season rather, which would rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the league, just behind Tennessee, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Denver, and New England. So clearly, he's a good coach. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that he would be a bad coach of the Giants. Now, Anthony, my question for you is, why do you think the Giants went out and said, let's go and interview Dan Quinn or put an interview on the books for Dan Quinn before they got their general manager?
Well, I kind of touched on that earlier. I'm going to answer that in just a second, but I want to say you just mentioned this was Dan Quinn's first year with this defense, and you mentioned seventh in the NFL, 21.1 points per game allowed. Compare that to last year. The Dallas Cowboys allowed 29.6 points per game. They were in the bottom 5 teams in the NFL. That is a drastic improvement, and that is something to take note of. And you know who's getting the credit for that? If you read any of the articles surrounding the Dallas Cowboys, it's Dan Quinn. And that's why, and this leads into the question that you asked, he's getting so much attention from teams around the league for the head coaching jobs. All these head coaching vacancies basically are requesting to interview Dan Quinn. Everyone's interested in Dan Quinn because, first of all, he was a successful head coach. Sure, he had a couple bad years towards the end, and that's why he got fired. That's usually what happens. Head coaches are usually successful for a while, Tom Coughlin, and then the team starts to lose, and then the team moves on from the head coach, and they try and go in a new direction. But sometimes those head coaches that built a great system leave for a while, Mike McCarthy, go to another team and are instantly successful once again because they took a year to step back and learn once again what they need to do. So I just gave you 2 examples right there. Why a team would have moved on from Dan Quinn. Why did we move on from Tom Coughlin? Pretty much the same thing. Why would a coach maybe find success after leaving for a little bit? Look at Mike McCarthy. He's found success. And I know he hasn't been perfect. And you're probably going to blame that horrible call in the wild card game on Mike McCarthy, as you should. He's not a perfect coach, but he is definitely an improvement over Jason Garrett, which is who they used to have. I do think that this Dallas team is much better coached than they were under Garrett. Now with Mike McCarthy, that offense runs on all cylinders right now with Mike McCarthy, the analytics, Kellen Moore, all of that stuff. So I think that really answers your question there. But also, you do have to keep in mind, like I mentioned at the beginning, according to the reports, every single one of the 3 Giants general manager candidates has Dan Quinn on their short list. So when you take into consideration all of these teams around the league that want to interview him for the vacancy, if the Giants don't put in this request as soon as possible, they literally will never get a chance to interview him because one of these teams is going to hire him probably in the coming days. And then we're going to hire a general manager in the coming days, and they're going to say, damn, I wish I got to interview Dan Quinn. And that's not something you want. You want everything to start off as smoothly as possible for the general manager. So I do think that's the main thing there. And then I also do want to touch on something else you mentioned. So you mentioned the cutting edge of coaching, right? With Dan Quinn, 50 years old, might not be the cutting edge. And I know who we usually mention when we say the cutting edge. We usually mention Brian Dabble, young offensive coordinator that's great with passing game. And then we also mention Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan's understudy, right? You know who the offensive coordinator was for the Falcons when they went to that Super Bowl under Dan Quinn, right? It was Kyle freaking Shanahan. Dan Quinn hired Kyle Shanahan to be his offensive coordinator. He's not an idiot. He knows what the cutting edge looks like. He knows how to find it, and he knows how to put it on his offensive staff. Who's to say that Dan Quinn wouldn't become the head coach of the Giants, get in contact with his former OC Kyle Shanahan, and ask him, hey, I understand Mike McDaniel might be a head coach somewhere else, but underneath Mike McDaniel, who on this coaching staff could be the next Kyle Shanahan? And they have a good relationship, so he might be able to find the Kyle Shanahan 2.0 by getting in contact with Kyle Shanahan. Coaching connections are super important, and we've been talking about Joe Shane, his coaching connections to Buffalo. We've been talking about Adam Peters, his coaching connections to San Francisco. Well, Dan Quinn has coaching connections to the Falcons, has coaching connections to the Cowboys, and also has coaching connections to the San Francisco 49ers, which is what we really want, right? We do want an offensive mind from San Francisco, and Dan Quinn might be our other ticket to getting that rather than hiring Mike McDaniel. So definitely keep that in mind. This is my number one point that I wanted to make when we were talking about Dan Quinn, why I'm at least to some extent a proponent of this, or I at least wouldn't groan if he was hired. It's because he has found an amazing offensive coordinator before. Who's to say he can't do it again? He knows what a good offense looks like, a good offensive scheme looks like, and he knows how to let the offensive coordinator go to work and create one of the best offenses in the NFL. Because when Kyle Shanahan and the Falcons were getting to work with Julio Jones, Matt Ryan was a freaking MVP under Dan Quinn's head coaching leadership and under Kyle Shanahan's offense. So keep that in mind, guys. Dan Quinn knows what a good offense looks like, and he knows how to hire good offensive coordinators. So I wouldn't moan and groan at this hire. It wouldn't be my number one choice. But to say that he doesn't know what the cutting edge looks like, or doesn't know how to find a good OC, or the Giants offense might lack, consistency because of this, it's just not true. The Falcons had a good offense every single year when Dan Quinn was the head coach over there, because he found Kyle Shanahan and he built a great offense. So that's what I got to say about the offensive side of the ball. I know Dan Quinn is a defensive-minded coach. A lot of Giants fans want an offensive-minded coach because that's cutting edge. Well, you know what? You can find the cutting-edge offensive coordinator to pair with your defensive-minded head coach, and you can find some pretty good success that way too.
And for the record, I don't necessarily care that much about like the offensive minded head coach. I'd rather them bring in like a coordinator who really knows what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like if you bring in a guy, I think Joe Judge had his hands dipped in too many bowls, and when it came to him doing his job well, he failed. With the timeouts, the time management, he was just way over his head. Being too conservative, he was just way in over his head. He was trying to do too many things and solve too many problems that shouldn't have been his to solve. And that might have been a result of poor coaching. So if I think you made a pretty solid argument actually that Dan Quinn, and I think the one that pushes it over the edge for me that I consider him as a legitimate option is that I actually think that having a head coach with his experience and an experience getting to the Super Bowl is a massive benefit. I'd rather go with an experienced head coach right now than someone that has no experience at all and maybe not even call plays for their offense. Like, I think the experience is a little bit underrated and undervalued at this point. Everybody wants something new, but he's gotten it done. So I do value that, I will say.
Yeah, and I'm also going to jump in because I forgot to make 2 points. One, there's another coaching connection for Dan Quinn, Seattle. He was with Seattle. He was a defensive coordinator of the Legion of Boom that won a Super Bowl. So don't just think he lost the Super Bowl with the Falcons. He won a Super Bowl with one of the best defenses of all time over there in Seattle. And you also just made the point that you don't think necessarily having an offensive-minded head coach is necessary, right? Because you said, I just want a really great offensive coordinator at the very least that can call plays and run the offense. Well, if you hire Dan Quinn as your head coach, that's exactly what you're going to get. You're probably going to get a phenomenal offensive coordinator to run the offense and call the plays, which is exactly what the Falcons had with Kyle Shanahan and that electric offense underneath Dan Quinn. So you kind of made my point for me in a way, but also you also reminded me, got to keep in mind, because you brought up the Super Bowl history. He has won a Super Bowl. He was a defensive coordinator of the Legion of Boom, and that's nothing to scoff at.
No, not at all, guys. Let us know what you think about Dan Quinn in the comments below. Always curious to hear your opinion. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure to drop a like and subscription as always on YouTube, and make sure to subscribe on Apple and Spotify and drop us a nice little review. Always appreciate the love. So thank you for that. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.